Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this partnership event with Edut Mekomit, Local Testimony, and the New Israel Fund in London. For those of you who don't know me, and it's really joyful to say there is quite a few people who I don't recognize in the crowd, as well as some really familiar faces. Again, welcome. I'm the Director of Content and Leadership here in London. Of course, New Israel Fund is an organization that works in Israel to promote democracy, human rights, and protect and empower minority groups. We have a really full lineup as well as a phenomenal exhibition here. So the first things first, I'm going to introduce Itai, photographer from Haaretz, who is also the prize-winning photographer from the Local Testimony exhibition this year, as well as Dana Wolfeiler, who is both the founder and the curator of the Local Testimony exhibition, which is exhibited annually at the Museum, the Eretz Israel Museum in Tel Aviv. After, they speak a little bit about the experience of curating this project, as well as photography, bashetach, as they say, in the field. We will hear from Noah and from Ayala, who will introduce after they speak.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much to the New Israeli Fund, Atira, Ella, David. We really, really appreciate the opportunity to show here this capsule exhibition, as we call it, which is a small part from the big exhibition shown in Tel Aviv. And I think that we've quite succeeded together to curate this exhibition as we try to cherry pick some images that will try to explain a little bit of the complexity of life in Israel in this past 3 years or past year, to say. We will be happy to explain afterwards if anyone should like to hear some more about the images, about the story behind the images. I think that each and every image here folds some more stories and more layers that it's a little bit difficult to understand in the first glimpse. I know it's a cliche, but really, every picture folds more than 1,000 words of story. So thank you for the opportunity. For me, the most important thing in this exhibition, in Local Testimony, in Edut Mekomit in general, is to evoke critical thought. Things are not necessarily as they seem. The complexity is much more than we sometimes understand. I really urge you to see also the video work of Gaza, in the next room here. If you missed it, it's something that we're very proud of. It was not easy to have this film and the cooperation with the Palestinian photographers, and it means a lot to us. So Itai, if you want to say a couple of words.
It's a great honor to be here, and my photo is the photo of the year in Kifel Hares, the Palestinian village. I was there in 23 and saw the festival in Yehoshua bin Nun grave. It's happened every 3 months, and I said I must go there to document again the situation after 7th of October, when the things in the West Bank got worse. The smoke from Gaza covered the West Bank, and while all eyes was on Gaza, the Palestinian in the West Bank suffered from settler violence. We can see it every day now. Also, a photo of mine is over there, a funeral of a settler in the West Bank. But for me, this special photo folds the view of the Israeli public, because I don't know if you saw it, it's a flat photo. It's a wall, actually. It's a wall with shadows, 3 shadows of soldier, a female soldier that doubles because of the lights, and an Orthodox man. That for us as photographers, when we see an Orthodox man and soldier, we showed it. The newspaper liked this stuff because this is what we as Israeli talked about. There's many articles about it. So I just saw this picture. I forgot to explain this grave, this festival, is different from other not festivals or holy graves when you go in the West Bank, because here the Palestinians go to a curfew for 10 to 12 hours every 3 months, and the prayers can walk freely in the village. It's a bizarre moment, long moment, when people have cars of food, selling chunt and hot dogs, and driving in electric corkinets, and you see young children, you see old people, you see everything. You see even not religious people, they're just curious to be in a Palestinian village. I said before, for me, one of the most strong moments was when Hagar, the journalist of the West Bank that now living here in London, that was there with me, asked one children that what you think about the Palestinians that inside the home, and he asked her, "Oh, there are people here?" And it's really, they quiet, hiding inside the homes. And this is a small alley that I walk and try to, to show this bizarre moment or event, and I shot the religious people and the soldiers automatically, without much thinking. And after I went home, after a couple of months, I understand that the flat photo, it's not natural to me to take a photo of the wall, of a flat. You want depth of field, you want here, you see something on here, the focus is here, you see the background. It's interesting. We as a photojournalist like to see depth of field. But depth of field here is hidden by a wall that we as Israelis can't see. Our reality, the military equipment of ultra-Orthodox, the soldiers, all our story as a society is built on this wall that we can't see. We try to solve this problem, but the roots of our existence is by the occupation. We need to learn the history to understand, to look inside, to understand why we are living like this. This was the understanding for me, and I was upset that I didn't understand it in the time I shot it. Here I shot another photo in the West Bank of the funeral. It's a funeral of a settler in Malachei HaShalom settlement that is really hardcore settlement. Malachei HaShalom is angels of peace. It's a couple of caravans, very radical families live there. And it's a new strategy, it's called farms. People build a caravan and control a major territory like a village of 1,000 people with their sheep and the cows. And this guy was killed in Gaza. He was a bulldozer operator that got money to destroy houses in Gaza. And I went there because, again, Hagar Shizaf sent me there to film this because Smotrich and Ben Gvir work whole nights to make it possible to bury him inside the settlement, which means they will never move from there. For me as a photojournalist, before was frightened sometimes to go to the West Bank because of Palestinian terror or stuff like this. Today, we're afraid from settlers. Some friend of mine almost got killed. Another photojournalist that was in the West Bank, I was with him. He went inside the village when there was a settlers attack, and he was beaten. They took the camera, and he's 70 years old, more than 70 years old. And the situation is changing when we are not looking and having our problem, the war in Iran, the hostages, terror attacks, rules against the courts. You can't handle with all this, and for me it's important to put my eyes over there. This is what I have.
I always say that for us, the public, the photojournalists are kind of field agents that helps us to frame the reality that we don't always see. And it's always surprising that also in Edut Mekomit in Israel, even with Israeli crowds, that sometimes they meet different kind of reality and they're surprised, like, does everyone know about it? Is it like a well-known thing? So thank you for all the...
was never covered by media, and it's happened for 12 years, I think, maybe more. Just daily life.
And it happens 4 times a year, and it's only in one location, so it's really important to understand this of many. So, thank you. Have a lovely evening. Atira.
Dana and Itai, thank you so much. And as Dana said, after we finish the formal content, there will be an opportunity to go around as well and hear directly from you two. Have your own kind of personal tour of the gallery with them too. We're here for the evening. So without further ado, I'm really thrilled to bring to the stage both Noah Landau and Ayala Panievsky. There's so much to say about both of you that I've been swatting up a little bit, but I'll try my best. So Noah Landau, you're a global editor now at Haaretz, but also a veteran journalist. You founded the initiative of Haaretz 21, which is about representation of Palestinian minority voices in the media. You've also been quoted as one of 50 most influential women in Forbes. And when I mentioned this to you, you said, clearly not influential enough given the situation. But we play the long game here, so we'll carry on to do that. Ayala, you are both at City St. George's University as a research associate and somehow miraculously at Cambridge University as well, having finished your doctorate in sociology there. We have your new book, The New Censorship, which you mentioned to me just won an IJPP award. Somebody's working. Excellent. And there are so many other awards, I'm not even going to start, forgive me. But Ayala will be signing her book. And I did say to Noah, what about your book? And she said no. So if you'd like to encourage her afterwards, that's fine. I will, without further ado, hand over to you, but just mention as well that you are working together with Molad, which is one of the partner organizations at the New Israel Fund. Molad is a think tank for the renewal of Israeli democracy. And perhaps you can also talk about the research that you sent to me earlier, finding in the representation of civil society, of Arab community, of humanitarian issues in Gaza, in the Israeli media, mainstream Israeli media in the last year. I'm handing over.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. This is a very nice venue. I want to start by taking us directly to the back room. Who has been there? Who went to see the video? I really encourage everyone to check it out later. The back room of this exhibition, which features the video with footage from Gaza, is also the back room of Israeli society in many ways. I do not think that there are many opportunities for Israelis today, I'm saying this mildly, to see the video that you can see today in that room. This is footage and these are photos that Israelis are not exposed to, most of them. I think a clear majority of Israelis are not exposed to it today. So even after these past years. And Ayala, you talk a lot and you write a lot also about the kind of censorship that is not, of course, official. Israel has official censorship, military censorship. It deals mostly with security issues, but this is a new kind of self-censorship and what I sometimes also call mainstream censorship, in the sense that people, the media doesn't want to upset the viewers and show them things that they do not want to see in a sort of a chicken and the egg situation, not because someone is forcing them, not because a military censor is in the studio and will shut them down if they do, but just because they choose not to show it. And this is, I think, quite a unique situation, right?
So first of all, thanks everyone for being here. I know there are many things happening elsewhere tonight, but I think this is unfortunately not that unique to Israel, and we see self-censorship elsewhere as well. But I think what is really unprecedented about this war specifically, and I think those of you who have family or friends in Israel probably felt it over the past few years, is that the kind of reality that you are exposed to here and the kind of reality that people are exposed to in Israel have grown apart quite significantly. I don't know how many of you have had this experience of trying to talk to people that you used to be very aligned with and to see things very similarly, and suddenly feeling them really, they are so far away from where you are. They like live on a different planet, right? I can see the nods, okay, you know what I'm talking about. So, and what we were trying to do at Molad, which is this fantastic group of researchers that are really invested in improving our lives, basically. We were trying to give a number to it. We were trying to understand, is it really what's going on, or is it just this weird feeling that we have? And we went for 6 months, the first 6 months of the war, which we thought were the war, because we couldn't imagine that it would still be going on even now. There is no front that is actually sealed, right, like right now. And we analyzed all the kind of a sample of all the items on the main TV channel in Israel, News 12, because it's the most popular one and the most influential one. And we were trying to understand whether these things that we felt like were filtered out, were they actually filtered out. And we had different coders who were watching and doing all the coding. And to be honest, we were surprised by how bad it was, because obviously we had an intuition. That's why we started the research, right? But we were surprised by two things. One was the extent of the erasure of communities' voices, and specifically the horrors from Gaza. And I'll say something about it in a sec. But the second thing was also, it wasn't just about erasing Palestinian voices from Gaza and Palestinian voices from the West Bank, and even Palestinian voices who are citizens of Israel, but it was also the disproportion between the kind of amplification of military voices against civil society, who kind of disappeared during this period of time, and the immense amplification of government voices and very minor attention to opposition voices, although this government is not very popular in Israel, and for long periods of time the opposition was more popular than the government, and yet the government got at least 10 times more exposure on the Israeli media. So we came back from this analysis, and to me, this is the kind of wall that Itai was just talking about, the wall of, you could say, denial, you could say something that enables these realities to kind of go further and further apart, of people everywhere seeing constantly footage and horrors and visuals that Israelis are not generally exposed to. Now, whenever I present the findings of this research, there are two responses that I always get from two different directions. One is from people who kind of don't like Israel, let's put it this way, or don't like Israelis too much, and they say, oh, you're making up excuses. People, if they wanted to know, they could go on social media. They could know, everything is out there. And this is true, the information is out there, and Palestinian journalists and other journalists have been doing incredible work in unbelievable conditions, right? However, the first thing I would say is that I don't think that in war times or in times of conflict, this is the kind of practice that is to be expected from most people, to actively search for casualties on the other side. It's a bit of a stretch. I don't think we have a history of that. But more than that, I don't think it matters, because I'm not trying to say anything about morality of Israelis or anyone else for this matter. I'm trying to say something about Israeli journalism and what happened to the Israeli media. And I think it's impossible to understand what this war looked like in Israel without realizing the decades of war that preceded this war, the war on the media in Israel and the war against journalism and journalists that Netanyahu and the far right and other factions of his coalition have launched against Israeli journalists and reporters, and of course to even greater extent against Palestinian journalists in the years that preceded October 7th. So when October 7th arrived, the Israeli media has already been weakened, scared, exhausted, full of people that were there to create false balances and kind of to represent the government in different ways. And a lot of what Noah said about self-censorship was very evident in the research that I've done over the past few years. And I'll give you one example from before the war, because I have an article that was published in 2021 about how the constant attacks by the government, the media bashing, the constant efforts to target reporters, to create these loyalty regimes where if you are a loyal reporter, then you're going to get all the benefits, and if you are not, then we're going to shut down, do whatever we can to shut down your newsroom. And back then, I was trying to understand from journalists what it does to them. And in practice, like in the most practical, like on a day-to-day basis, what does it mean for you? And there are many, there is a lot of attention granted sometimes to the emotional impact of all this harassment and the physical impact. Sometimes you have thugs kind of following you, etc. But for me, what I cared about was, what are they not telling us as a result? Like what's the impact on us in the end? And it was very clear. And all the journalists I spoke to, when I asked them, so give me an example. You tell me you no longer say certain words on air. What words? And it was obvious that the answer was the occupation. And it was obvious that people stopped using this word because it was labeled as too lefty, right? Because if it's your land, it can't be occupied. And this was years before October 7th. So this is just to say that the war already kind of broke in a moment where journalism in Israel was very much weakened, but unfortunately, it's not the only place where these kind of things happen.
I was thinking when you were talking about the question of social media, I was thinking to myself, you live in a world where you believe that social media is this neutral arena of ideas and thoughts that you can just scroll around and find whatever you would like to find. But we know these days that there are actually algorithm bubbles, and the more you see something that you like, the more you will see that. The less you will see something you do not like or you do not want to see. So I think even when we think about when we think usually about censorship, we think about countries that block social media, right? But this day and age, it's even more complicated, because even in countries where all the information is available and flowing, you might not see it. Of course, there's a different weight, if you see someone who tweeted something as opposed to the main news channel that everyone's watching and everyone will talk about the next day. There's also, the question of different levels of how do you categorize, what is the seriousness of the information that you receive. So I think that also has an impact. I think there's always been in Israel's history the question of patriotism in journalism, right? So a lot of what we hear, not necessarily only in this war, but in previous wars, is journalists coming and saying things like, I'm first Jewish, I'm first Israeli, and then I'm a journalist, like giving, also categorizing these, components, how important they are, and who should you serve. And, the basic argument is that journalism should be more patriotic, especially in war times. It sounds, very simplistic, but we actually saw this war, I think, probably, I would say, quite a lot of today's journalists, even if they're not necessarily, people don't necessarily think about them as right-wing, quite a lot of them had that kind of sentiment. So, this question of Israeli first and then I'm a journalist is also something, it's not self-censorship as it is also like a sense of patriotism, of course. I think that's also, a part of the reason we didn't. Yes.
Because I think actually many journalists speak like that and think that what they are doing by hiding certain stories from their audience or not kind of confronting people with visuals they don't want to see, they think this is patriotism. And I think this is a huge part of the problem, because I don't think that patriotism is the situation we are now, where Israelis don't know what's happening and haven't seen the horrors and the toll of what's happening 1 hour drive away from their homes, and everyone else in the world has, right? I don't think there is anything patriotic about it, but it's true that there is no case, no public case, no one is saying, I am patriotic because I'm a critical journalist, because I think that's what we need, to know everything and to see everything. And I think this is not, again, unique to the Israeli experience, in the sense that I don't know how many of you remember how the media here covered wars elsewhere. Of course, it's a very different scenario. But in general, if you look at research on media in wartime, there is this kind of rally around the flag effect and like trying to be patriotic. But what I'm trying to tell my journalism students at City is that there is nothing patriotic about it, because obviously it erases and dehumanizes the Palestinians in Gaza. And you're right, the sentiment of there is no one innocent in Gaza was very strong in the mainstream media in Israel, not just the far right, not just the lunatics. But it doesn't do anything for Israelis either, in my view, and it actually increases the gap, not just between what we know and what happens out there, but also between Israelis and the world. And this is the kind of gap that it creates, that also really lends itself to then everyone who criticizes us must be anti-Semitic, because if you don't see what enraged people so much, then you don't understand what they really want from you.
Right. I try to talk a lot to Israeli students when I can, and sometimes I ask them this question, imagine you saw, a football match, and the news item would be something like, yesterday there was a football match and it ended. And you have no idea what's the result, what ended, what happened, who won, who didn't. And this is, a simple question of plain information. Even as like you said, even if you take the moral part out of it and you just look at, what kind of information I have to judge what's happening in the world around us also. You mentioned, of course, Netanyahu's war domestically on the Israeli media, and of course, I have to do a little shout out for Haaretz here, who, by the way, reads Haaretz. Great. So of course, Haaretz is one of these news outlets who doesn't shy from reporting also on what's happening in Gaza, of course, and there is a price that we currently pay. It's not only, discussions about censorship or self-censorship. The government actually decided, and we're now fighting this in court, to sanction Haaretz for doing so, and they're currently defunding us from what's called government advertising, and canceling all the subscriptions for public employees. So there is a price that you can pay, and I'd love you to kind of walk us through how does it look, on the bigger picture, because it's not only Haaretz, of course.
Yeah, so I think what's interesting in Netanyahu's war on the media is that it is actually much more successful than the other wars he's currently running. It went pretty well. Like he had many successes on this front. It started many years ago. I mean, he was ahead of the curve in this sense. For many years now, Netanyahu was working in this dual route to weaken and undermine any critical independent journalist or newsroom, and at the same time, and people don't always understand that this is part of the same mechanism, to establish this new media sphere with news organizations, media organizations that pretend to do journalism but actually don't do journalistic work at all. And actually what they do is they spread misinformation, conspiracy theories, hate speech, and in Israel's case, also incitement to genocide in Gaza that you've seen a lot on Channel 14 if you've been watching, and I hope you haven't. This is constantly kind of undermining the people who are trying to do journalism and establishing this alternative that looks the same. People are sitting with suits and stuff, and they have a table and like the mics, but there is no journalistic work done there, and it's full-on propaganda. And the impact that they had on professional journalism as well was very tangible, because they both go after journalists who dare reporting things they don't like. Like there was a very famous case where Guy Peleg, who is a journalist in News 12, was reporting on alleged abuse of detainees in Sdat Eiman, and the kind of bashing, the kind of threats, death threats that he was facing as a result. It really, when I was speaking to journalists, it was very clear that it's not like people are facing these threats and then saying, okay, I will no longer cover everything that's happening, but you just get exhausted. And yes, every once in a while, maybe you have a scoop, maybe you have a story that is big enough to face this. But if most of the days, if you don't have to get thousands of death threats to the lives of your children to your phone, maybe you'll take that route most of the days. And the impact on the public conversation in Israel is detrimental. I mean, as someone who has been, we've been living here for many years, but we spend a lot of time in Israel. And these visits every few months, I feel like really show you the kind of, it's like watching a car crash, basically. You see how awful things become and how many voices, topics, ideas are being just entirely silenced. And I think, I don't know if it answers the question in any way, but what I think is perhaps helpful to realize is that any media outlet in Israel gets a special kind of tailor-made attack by Netanyahu's government. So Haaretz, because it's based on subscribers, like I hope many of you, it is less, the government can take away the subscribers, so they do what they can. They take away the government spending, etc. TV channels, big news organizations in Israel that are still very popular. So these are, I know everyone is saying, oh, everyone is on social media, blah, blah, blah. No, the media organizations in Israel are very popular and very powerful. And this is why Netanyahu is going after them. He wouldn't bother otherwise. And I think what you see is really this ongoing war over the years that take place in different arenas. So there are legal threats. There are libel lawsuits, slaps filed against journalists. And I feel like the legal warfare against journalism, people often don't get it right because they say, oh, yeah, if someone published something wrong, then fuck them. But if it's true, then they'll be fine. But that's not the story. These lawsuits are intended to take away resources, time, money, energies, days of your life, sometimes years, and funding from news organizations that don't have that funding, actually, and journalists who then spend years defending themselves instead of doing investigative journalism or something else they could have done with this time. So there is a legal warfare, there is a legislation warfare that is going on right now as we speak, every day now. You would have thought that a country that is involved in like, I don't know, 3 wars now, that our representatives in the parliament would be busy doing that. But no, actually, there are 12-hour debates every day in parliament around the media law, the new media law, that Netanyahu's government is trying to pass to further restrict and curb press freedom in Israel and to further benefit the media outlets that are basically serving as mouthpiece for the government. So this is a war that is very much still going on, and I would argue many of the figures in this government are more invested in this war than in the others.
Yes, for sure. I mean, we saw it was just in this past, 24 hours of escalation that we had. Guess what the Israeli parliament was doing while the missiles were flying above people's heads? They were in parliament trying to promote their war against the media and the rule of law. So that's definitely their priority. Are we taking some questions? Yeah, we are. Okay, so you know the drill, that the question is with the question mark and all that. So we'll take some questions here.
Okay, so what we're going to do is have 3 or 4 questions together, and then Noah and Ayala will answer them in the best way possible. Okay, so.
Yeah, thank you. Aren't you making it a bit easy to the economic interests behind those channels? And I think language has power, so calling every media outlet as if it's journalism, it's a bit messing around the terminology. Because even 12 is not really so. I mean, the fact is, Haaretz can still do that, Edut Mekomit, 972, and many others with all. So maybe not everyone that carries a certificate of a journalist is actually a journalist. So that's the question.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much for the wonderful conversation. I didn't read your book yet, but it's here and I'm going to read it. So if it's there, I'm sorry in advance. I was wondering, I guess it kind of relates to that question about media ownership and how that kind of affects a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, media ownership. We had another question.
Hi guys, I'd love to know what role you think this censorship is going to play in the upcoming election.
Okay. Do we have enough questions to get busy with? Okay, we'll have another round afterwards.
Thanks. So great questions. Well done, everyone. To your first question about the journalists, I agree 100%. And part of what I'm trying to do, actually, both as an academic right now and as kind of someone who is working a lot with journalists and news organizations, is to make journalists see that we need this distinction. We need this distinction between journalists and people who just, my aunt kind of making up content and just like putting it on Facebook. God bless her, great content, but she's not a journalist. So I do think we need professional organizations and associations that have the power, like with lawyers or doctors, that you can bar someone if they are failing or do misconduct, kind of intentionally lying to the public, and it's revealed and they don't correct it. Like, we need to have this kind of distinction. And for many years, people, both journalists and academics, were really reluctant to touch this because they were like, we don't want to make these distinctions. And I can see why, because we don't want governments to make these distinctions. We definitely don't want big corporations to make these distinctions. So who does? But we will have to build a mechanism. And I think professional associations are the most promising kind of way to go about it. And to make sure that people are not weaponizing press freedom and all the protections that media organizations get to work against us. What's the point, right? And this is true in this country, by the way, as well. You see GB News, you see what's happening. Like, where is the regulator, right? Where is Ofcom? So that's to your question. To your question about media ownership, it's a great question. Another route of the war against the media is also trying to get very wealthy people to take over media organizations, right? We've seen this, it's not unique to Israel either, right? We've seen this in Hungary and other places before. We see it now in the US playing out very, very fast. Like, the pace in the US is just incredible. And we've seen this in Israel as well. But I do want to say something, because many times, and this is in the book, but many times people are saying, of course, the media is complicit because of ratings, right? They amplify the far right because they want the ratings, and they only care about the ratings, and this is why they don't. But if the idea is that the pursuit of ratings is what causes journalists to do such a poor job in so many contexts, then we would see a massive difference between commercial media and public-owned media, which I haven't found in my research in Israel. And the second thing is, you would see if the kind of assumption is they want provocations because this brings in the ratings, so they bring in Ben-Gvir because it creates provocations. We should have seen many provocateurs on the left as well, and certainly more Palestinian speakers. It's very controversial today to have a Palestinian speaker in the studio, but you don't see this. So maybe it's not about the drama and the provocation exactly, and it's more about things that, like Noah said, that people are trying to appease an imagined audience, and they are trying to appease the little kind of Netanyahu in their head, as my dear friend Jonathan Levy calls it. And what I found in my interviews was that journalists really thought, I'm not talking about the kind of the far-right loonies of the world, I'm not talking about the propaganda machines, I'm talking about journalists who, whatever their politics, they take their profession seriously and they try to do a good job and they want to serve the people. They thought that by avoiding stories, that by self-censoring, avoiding words, avoiding interviewees, they will maintain the public's trust under all these attacks of them being lefty traitors. That's their way to signal to the audience, we are not these lefty traitors they say they are. And the second thing, they thought it would prevent further attacks by the government and its allies. By now, I think it's pretty clear that none of these work, actually. Apart from doing terrible journalism as a result, it just doesn't work. The attacks continued. They now reached a new peak in Israel. And the public, the impact of the campaign against the media is also not neutralized by this approach. So what you have is a very kind of far-right conspiracy theory sphere of media that pretends to be journalism, and then you have a sphere of journalism that is cowed away, like just undermined, weakened, threatened, intimidated, scared of the government and scared of the audience. And over time, it shifts the entire public conversation to the right. And of course, you also have Haaretz and other incredible journalists who are doing unbelievable work. But unfortunately, it doesn't reach enough people in Israel just yet. Yes.
Someone asked about the elections. I hope we do have elections. I wanted to say something about the question of who is a journalist. There's a lot of discussions today about what people call news influencers, right? So news influencers apparently are on the rise, and they're bigger than some media outlets. But when I look at actually research about news influencers and who are these news influencers, I see that the top ones are actually journalists. The ones that drive much of the attention of the crowd are journalists that went to be independent and do their journalism independently. So I think that also tells us a little bit something about who's what is professional journalism, even if when you take it to the setting of social media, which is a possibility. And the other thing I wanted to say is that I think we need to also look at of course, we're journalists, we're critical, we need to also criticize ourselves. And a lot of what's happening today is, of course, a backlash to the fact that many of these people could not find their opinions for a long time on many of the news outlets out there. It's part of what's happening, but more than that, it's also a tool that the government utilizes when they want to say, we're not here to censor or we're not waging war against the media, we're diversifying. And why are they able to claim and to say that they're, bringing more diversity or balancing the media landscape? Because many times, yes, you cannot see Palestinians or other parts of the Israeli public on the general mainstream news outlets. And also, that the project that Atira mentioned before about Asadar, it's trying to bring more Palestinian voices to our own newspapers, also part of, looking at ourselves and saying, okay, we are also do not have a diverse enough staff within our own newsroom. So it's also important, I think, to look, with this government, it's easy to say, we're fighting the good fight, but we should also look at ourselves and at our newsrooms and see, are we really serving the population, the whole population? So I wanted to say that, and that is not an answer to any of your questions.
I would just push back a little bit, just a little bit, because I feel like many times, it's true, of course, what you said, and I think in the book you'll find that half of the criticism is really about Netanyahu, Trump, Farage, all these kind of media warriors. But the other half is about how journalists and newsrooms cope with this, and the media's reaction to that, which was also not helpful, to say the least. But I do think that many times what we tend to do is to conflate our media criticism, and I'm sure everyone in this room, including us, has a lot to say, with the kind of media bashing that we see. Because the fact that the Palestinian citizens of Israel, who are 20% of the population, are barely seen on the Israeli mainstream media, is a serious problem that needs to be tackled. It has nothing to do with the fact that Netanyahu's voters think the media is biased. Like, our sins are not necessarily the reasons that people hate the media. Like, you can have serious flaws and you need to solve them, but it's not always why people hate you, which is a much more accurate term, right? In the past, they used to talk about trust, distrust. It's not distrust, it's actual hate. I have a few colleagues, and we conducted a survey where we asked people an open-ended question in Israel, like over 1,000 people. What do you think about journalists? Just like that, like neutral, nothing enraging in particular, and the answers we got were scary, like really scary stuff. It wasn't, oh, they are so biased. There was a lot of that as well, and lefty, etc. But it was bloodthirsty, kind of anti-Israel, hating our country, trying to take it down kind of thing. That is not necessarily the result of watching TV and thinking, I think this journalist is paid by a foreign agent. It's the result of the campaign against the media, which is very effective. And even if the media tries to work, and I hope it does, on its flaws and improve and includes more audiences and more groups in society and give them representation and a voice, as long as the campaign against the media goes on, the impact will be there, and therefore we need to fight back against it.
Thank you. I'm going to take 3 more questions, and yes, okay, I'm coming round.
Yes, hi. What do you think about Asaf Rappaport buying Channel 13 in Israel? Asaf Rappaport buying, and how will it change the media overall in Israel?
Sorry. Hi. You mentioned the important contribution of the Palestinian photographers in the back room, quite symbolically. They're not on the panel. Do you feel that post October 7, it's been difficult to get Palestinians to even show support, even in an event like this where they should feel more welcome?
Okay, going round. I'm going to go with 4 questions this time. I think you can manage, right? Okay.
I have a question about what I'd say fear versus ethos of journalists. The war and the genocide should have been a wake-up call for us as a society. And it makes me think and believe that it is not only necessarily fear that guides journalists to not speak up, but also an ethos that Israel has been, growing for decades and decades and decades, which every Israeli has been educated upon, that is very, very difficult to change. And I wonder how much of this silence is derived from fear of Netanyahu is just the, especially with these to ethos. How might this change? And given the situation and the current social state of Israeli society, people on the news showing us what is going on in Gaza, be receptive. That's happened.
Thanks for a fascinating conversation. I want to ask a question about foreign information manipulation. So usually societies in conflict are super vulnerable to this kind of exploitation from Russia and other actors. And I know that Iran has made some fairly unsophisticated inroads into Israel in the conflict. But I wanted to hear from you if this sort of foreign information manipulation was significant in Israel, or if Israel is producing enough of its own disinformation.
Okay, just to say after this, we'll do maybe 2 more questions very briefly. So
my superpower is forgetting all the questions by the time I have to answer them. But no, I remember there was something there about 13, channel 13, right? So I think for those who don't know, there was an attempt to take over one of the big TV channels in Israel by a billionaire called Patrick Drahi, who is an associate of Netanyahu. And there were efforts to block this, which were surprisingly successful. So actually this is a very special case where journalists did what they didn't do in so many cases during the past few years. They got together in solidarity and collaboration, like they didn't do when, for instance, the Gaza Strip was blocked and banned for journalists to enter, right? They worked together in solidarity, collaborated, and put a strong front against this, and they managed to block quite a few significant steps because Netanyahu wanted to kick out Raviv Drucker, who is a journalist he really doesn't like. He wanted to take over the channel. He didn't. And another important part of the story is that the kind of liberal camp in Israel, shall we call it, that was more organized and mobilized after the 2023 kind of protests, realized that this is an important front and this is actually a war that should be fought. And they found the people who were opposing this government's policies and agenda and were willing to put their money there, not because they think they will see revenues out of it, because they won't, but because they think it's important that another TV channel doesn't fall into the hands of another friend of Bibi. So I think it's a very hopeful kind of story. We'll see what happens. Will it work? Will it fail? All options are on the table currently. But I think it's good to know that when journalists are working together, it's actually possible. So that's my Channel 13 take. there was another question on this side of the about the back room, the visuals that haunt us. And I think there are many people actually in this room. So I want to say two things about this room. One is I think it's still very special and very rare to have a space when you can carry the pain and grieve on people in different sides of the border. It has become really difficult to do, and I'm very glad for the NIF for that. And the second thing is to say that there are many people in the room who would know more about these constant efforts to create some kind of solidarity and collaborative action with Palestinian journalists, but also Palestinian activists and Palestinian scholars. This is something that obviously has become more difficult for obvious reasons, but I think but it's possible. I mean, it's a lot of work and a lot of effort, and I understand people who have different feelings about this. But if Noah was talking about the way we should also criticize ourselves in a way, I think for the past few years, I don't know how many of you went to any protests around the war, but one of the things that I'm thinking of as our fault, sort of, is that it became this either-or game of like, you either care about the horrors in Gaza or you want to bring back the hostages back then or anything like that on the other side. And this is something that I think is a bit on us for not being super vocal in these shared Israeli-Palestinian protests that say, end this fucking war or whatever it is at the moment, right? So this is something that I think we have to dedicate more energy and work so that the space is not left for the worst voices and the most extreme voices in both societies. I don't know if it helps, but
sure. Largely speaking, yes. Yes, it's very hard, but we should make more of an effort. Both. It's both. And it's marginal. Over there, it's marginal. So Asaf Zamir, largely speaking, it's okay. It's good. Asaf Rapoport, also the other one. Generally speaking, it's good, but there is also some criticism. Yes, it's harder to have joint, events with Palestinians. Of course, it's harder. We need to make more of an effort. There's the censorship and the ethos. It's both of them together. The more mainstream you are, the more the ethos, I think, affects it. And for foreign information campaigns, it's marginal, I think, at this point.
Okay, so I have been told to wrap up. I'm sorry, but our guests will be here, can take questions privately. Please go ahead and ask them. And I'm handing it over to David now, our Chief Executive.
So, first of all, a big round of applause for our two speakers and for what they had to say. I'm going to end on a thank you, but I just wanted to share a couple of quick things because some of the questions I think were actually for NIF rather than our two speakers. So this photography exhibition is the first time we've done it properly in partnership with Local Testimony, and we hope to run it every year. And it's one of 3 big events that we do. The other one is an event in honor of Vivian Silva, which gives an award every year to 1 Palestinian and 1 Jewish woman who are still working towards peace. And the other is our long-running Human Rights Award, where one of the winners is a Palestinian and one of the winners is a Jewish Israeli. So this one didn't have a Palestinian speaker, but I promise you that New Israel Fund regularly hosts events where we bring both Israelis and Palestinians to speak to our audiences in the UK. And I guess that sets me up for what I wanted to say, which is the whole point of this exhibition and this talk today is how we all see the whole picture. And we went because we had 2 Israeli speakers and we were talking about the Israeli media for what the Israeli media doesn't see. But what this exhibition shows you is that we can see everything. We can see the hostages coming home and the families fighting and everyone fighting alongside them to bring them home. We can see destruction in Gaza. We can see Jewish victims of terror in the West Bank, and we can see violent settlers perpetrating awful things in the West Bank. We can see Israelis suffering through war from Iran, and we can also see the resilience or post-trauma, depending on how you interpret the pictures, of people trying to get on with their daily life. It's about seeing the whole picture. And for everything that's true of what was said about the gaps in the Israeli media landscape, I think we also have a role as those that care about both Israelis and Palestinians to challenge some of those in the UK who only see one side and actually it's only the other side. So I wanted to say that. I also just want to end with some words from a very brave Israeli journalist. Before I do that, anyone who isn't familiar, please check out Fake Reporter, who are a grantee of ours who deal with a lot of this stuff and who dealt with some of the Iranian infiltration into the Israeli media. So Ilana Dayan is an Israeli broadcaster for Channel 13, I believe. I hope I got that right. 12? Damn. So I found myself spending 7 weeks in Israel recently, 5 weeks of which were during the recent war, which was a more visceral experience of a lot of the reality that we normally see from afar. But in one broadcast, quite early on, there were an elderly couple that were killed in Ramat Gan. And they were killed meters from their shelter. And she closed an evening broadcast. Imagine like the Channel 6, the 6 o'clock or the 10 o'clock news. The camera pans to her, and for 2 minutes she says some of the following. Those in the government who approved attack plans but have not approved the plans for the protective measures for people who have no way of getting to the shelter in time, or for those who have no shelter at all, must be accountable. They are the ones who are taking us to war inside a war inside a war, while sharing videos of themselves boasting about Israel being a superpower and always winning. But Yaron and Ilana from Ramat Gan can't win anymore. But neither will the rest of us if on our way to crushing the axis of evil, we forget who we are. But this is the really brave bit. She then went on to talk about a Palestinian family who were killed by Israeli soldiers near the town of Tamnun. They didn't die by an Iranian missile, but by Israeli fire, as they were driving home from holiday shopping. Undercover forces sprayed their car with bullets and killed them. We cannot normalize the death around us, and we must insist on the sanctity of life, of every human life. There is no victory, and this is a reference to the total victory slogan. There is no victory more complete than that. Thank you. One more thank you, sorry, just to embarrass someone, but all of this event and all of this exhibition would not have been possible without the person in our team who's now hiding from me. So, but Ella Tirosh, you've done a fantastic job, so a huge thank you to her. And one final plug. We have, I think, about 10 or 12 copies of Ayala's book here tonight. We asked for a suggested donation of at least £20 to get that copy, because you will also be able to get it signed. But we also encourage the many more of you that will want the book than we have with us tonight to, of course, buy it, because it is a fantastic book. So thank you.